It happened on a warm Saturday evening, the kind that used to make me feel alive. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, and the smell of barbecue lingered in the air. Dozens of teenagers and their parents gathered for Lena's high school graduation party, her big send-off before college. I had spent all week helping Rebecca, my daughter, plan it. I brought handmade decorations, baked Lena's favorite lemon cake from scratch, and even arranged the centerpieces with her school colors. I stood near the drinks table, sipping lemonade, my back a little sore from hours of prepping earlier that day. I was smiling, watching Lena from a distance. She looked beautiful, tall, confident, wrapped in youth and laughter. I remember thinking, she's really growing up. I had tears in my eyes, but they were the good kind, or so I thought. She was with her friends, all dressed in crop tops, denim shorts, and sneakers with names I couldn't pronounce. They were taking pictures, laughing, posing with balloons that read, Class of 2025. I walked over slowly, carrying the cake I had just unboxed, eager to be part of the celebration. I approached with a gentle smile. "Lena, sweetie." That's when she turned to her friends, giggled, and said loud enough for the whole group and me to hear, "She's too old to be here. That's my grandma." The girls burst into laughter. A few even covered their mouths in mock surprise, like I'd crashed a party I wasn't invited to. I stopped walking, my hands froze around the cake tray. In that one sentence, that careless, thoughtless sentence, she cut something out of me I didn't even know could bleed. I smiled, a practiced one, the kind of smile women my age wear when we've been dismissed, insulted, or forgotten but don't want to make a scene. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. Rebecca was across the yard, chatting with a neighbor. She hadn't heard it, or if she had, she pretended not to. No one came to my side. No one pulled Lena aside to say that was uncalled for. I set the cake down on the table near the music speaker. My hands were shaking slightly, but I don't think anyone noticed. I looked around, and for the first time that day, I truly realized, that I was no longer seen as part of the celebration. I was just there, background noise, a burden maybe, an old woman with graying hair and orthopedic shoes who didn't belong among the music and youth and wild, bright future. That was the moment something inside me quietly folded in on itself. I didn't cry, not then. I didn't yell or make a dramatic exit. I just turned, walked to my car, and drove home. No one stopped me, not even my daughter, not even the child I had diapered, fed, and cradled through chickenpox and heartbreaks. And when I got home, alone, silent, and still wearing the little brooch Lena had gifted me in middle school, I poured myself a glass of water, logged into my online bank account, and pulled up the $529 college fund savings plan I had opened when Lena was just 2 years old. Every birthday, I added to it. Every Christmas bonus went there. Every tax refund, even when I needed a new roof or a medical scan, I put into her future. The balance read $72,481.23. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I clicked withdraw and whispered to myself, she may think I'm too old to be there, but she's about to find out just how much being there costs me. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting stories. Before the party, before the silence, before that smirk on her face, I would have told you my life was full. Not perfect, not glamorous, but full. I raised my daughter Rebecca as a single mom after my husband died when she was only 10, a car accident on a snowy night, quick, brutal, unforgiving. After that, it was just me. I worked as an elementary school teacher for 37 years. Not a flashy career, but it meant something to me. I believed in showing up, in being dependable, and I brought that same commitment home with me. When Rebecca got pregnant at 19, I didn't yell. I didn't guilt her. I held her hand and told her, "We'll figure it out." And we did. I was there at every doctor's appointment. I held Rebecca's hair during morning sickness. I was the one pacing outside the delivery room when she gave birth to Lena. The moment I held Lena in my arms, all 5 pounds 7 ounces of her, something inside me lit up, a second chance, a new chapter. I looked at her, and all I wanted was to protect her future. I opened the college fund account the week after she was born. I still remember the bank teller's name, Janine. She smiled and said, "You're a good grandma." And I was. I tried to be. I never made a big show about what I gave. It wasn't my style. But behind the scenes, I was pouring everything I had into that girl. Every birthday, I'd buy her books, not toys. I wanted her to fall in love with stories the way I had. Every Christmas, I added $500 to her fund. When Rebecca couldn't afford daycare, I retired a little earlier than I wanted to and watched Lena myself. I changed her diapers, taught her to tie her shoes, and made her pancakes every Friday shaped like the first letter of her name. We had rituals: afternoon cocoa after school, watching old movies, making scrapbooks. She used to call me her best friend. She used to fall asleep on my shoulder, even when she was too big to fit comfortably. When she was 9, she wrote in a Mother's Day card, "Grandma, you're like a mom but with extra hugs." I still have it, still stained with glitter and love. And Rebecca, well, our relationship had its ups and downs. She was grateful, sure, but over the years, it turned into something else. She started expecting my help, not appreciating it. When Lena hit her teenage years, I became just grandma. They stopped asking me how I was feeling. When I had knee surgery, neither of them came to stay with me. I had to pay for a nurse. Still, I told myself, they're busy. They're building a life. That was what I wanted for them, wasn't it? I let things slide. I made excuses. Myself, the way they pulled away was normal. I tried not to take it personally when Lena stopped calling me after school. I told myself not to be needy, not to be dramatic. I was lucky just to be part of their world, and I believed it when they invited me to her graduation party. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. I was excited genuinely. I baked her a cake from scratch the way she liked it. 3 layers, lemon cream, hand-iced, tiny flowers. I wore the pearl earrings she had once complimented, hoping she'd notice. I even ironed my best blouse. I didn't think for one second that I didn't belong there, because until that moment in the backyard, when she looked at me like I was an outdated piece of furniture someone forgot to move, I really thought I mattered. I thought I still had a place. But now I see it clearly. I gave everything I had, my time, my money, my youth, my love, and in return, I became invisible. Not all at once, but piece by piece, quietly. And maybe the most painful part? I let it happen because I thought that's what love looked like. The first sign wasn't loud, it was quiet, the kind of moment that you almost miss unless you're really paying attention. It started about a year before the party. I was sitting in my kitchen on a Thursday evening, sipping chamomile tea, waiting for Lena to call. We had a tradition. Every Thursday after school, she'd call and tell me something new she learned that week. Sometimes math, sometimes gossip, sometimes just how much she hated gym class. It had been our little ritual since 5th grade. That week, the phone didn't ring. I waited until 8 p.m., then finally texted her. "Missed our chat today. Everything okay?" No response. The next morning, Rebecca called. She didn't sound concerned, just distracted. "Oh, yeah, Lena's been busy. You know how teenagers are. She'll catch up with you soon." I laughed it off, of course. I told myself, teenagers. She's probably got homework or a new crush or both. Still, that week turned into 2, then 3. The calls didn't resume. One afternoon, I stopped by their house with some homemade apple butter and a book I thought Lena would love. Something about a girl who rebuilt her life after being rejected by her family. It felt timely, but I didn't say that out loud. Rebecca answered the door. She looked surprised. "Oh, you didn't tell me you were coming." "I just wanted to drop this off," I smiled, holding up the jar and the book. She took them but didn't invite me in. "Lena's upstairs with her friends. She's kind of in her own world lately." I looked past her shoulder, hearing laughter, the sound of young voices bouncing off walls I used to be part of. "Tell her I said hi," I said softly. "Sure," Rebecca said. "She'll love the book." But she never mentioned it again. The next red flag came when I saw a photo on Lena's social media, one of those group selfies teens take at arm's length. Lena was in the center, making a duck face. The caption read, "We don't do landlines and grandma drama." I paused. My heart skipped in a way I hadn't felt in years. I clicked on the comments, some laughing emojis, some LOL yes from her friends. I wasn't tagged, but I felt tagged just the same. I left a simple comment. Looks like you had fun. Miss you, sweetheart. A few hours later, I went back to see if she'd replied. My comment was gone, deleted. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. Maybe she accidentally hit the wrong button. But when I tried to call her later that night, it went straight to voicemail. Still, I tried to stay hopeful. I kept showing up. I sent postcards when I visited the botanical gardens. I mailed her a little necklace I'd found at a craft fair, just a delicate silver leaf, something understated, something pretty. I never got a thank you, not even a text. Then came the school play. Lena had a small role in the spring production, Rebecca told me over the phone, and I immediately bought tickets. I was so excited. I ironed my best cardigan, made her a bouquet of tulips, and showed up early to get a good seat. The auditorium was packed. Parents laughed and waved to their kids from the front row. Lena walked on stage, said her lines, and walked off without looking into the audience. I clapped until my palms hurt. After the show, I waited near the stage door. Kids poured out in clusters, hugging friends and snapping selfies. Rebecca emerged with Lena a few minutes later. I called out, "Lena?" She turned, saw me, and then turned back to her friend, pretending not to hear. Rebecca looked uncomfortable. "Oh, Mom, she's just overwhelmed right now. You know how teens are." I nodded, flowers still in hand. Later that night, I left the tulips on their porch. The next morning, I saw the same bouquet, wilted and unopened, in their garbage bin when I stopped by to return a dish I had borrowed. That was when something in me started to shift, just slightly, like a floorboard that creaks beneath your feet. I wasn't just being left out, I was being quietly written out. And for the first time, I wondered if love, even deep unconditional love, could survive being taken for granted too long. It's strange how you don't always notice when you're being erased, not at first. It doesn't happen with a scream or a door slammed in your face. It happens in whispers, glances, and forgotten birthdays. It happens while you're still folding their laundry, still showing up with soup when they're sick, still smiling while you're fading. After that school play, I told myself it was a phase. Teenagers pull away. That's what everyone says. But with Lena, it felt different, like she wasn't just growing up, she was outgrowing me. I stopped getting phone calls, no more updates about school, boys, or the latest books she was reading. The messages I sent were either ignored or replied to with a dry K or TO. I'd spent years nurturing that little girl, holding her hand through nightmares, driving her to spelling bees, sewing her Halloween costumes. I remembered the way she used to beg me for one more story at bedtime, but now if I spoke more than a few sentences in a conversation, she looked at her phone. One Saturday, I offered to take her shopping. She needed a dress for a senior banquet, and I had saved up for something special. I picked her up, excited to surprise her. I even put on lipstick, a soft rose color she once said made me look classy. We pulled into the mall, and she barely looked up from her phone. I said, "There's a nice new boutique I found. The woman who owns it was one of my students, actually." She cut me off. "Grandma, no offense, but can we not do the back in your day stuff? I just want to go where my friends shop." I laughed nervously, trying to hide the sting. "Of course, sweetie. Lead the way." In the store, she picked out a black sequin dress that I thought was a bit much, but I kept that to myself. I stood back as she posed in the mirror, taking selfies. Then I noticed her post one with a caption, "Shopping with the Elderlies." I saw it pop up on my phone from the account I still followed, even though she barely acknowledged me online anymore. I didn't say anything, I just quietly paid for the dress. Later that day, I dropped her off, and she barely said thank you before slamming the car door. The next week, I stopped by their house with a pan of lasagna, the kind Rebecca used to beg for in college. I baked it from scratch, layering it with love and seasoning like I always did. Rebecca answered the door in workout leggings, clearly not expecting me. "Oh," she said, glancing at the dish. "I thought you said you were going to call first." "I just thought I'd surprise you too," I said, holding it out with both hands. "This one's Lena's favorite, remember?" Rebecca took the dish, but didn't invite me in. "She's out with friends," she said, And honestly, Mom, she's kind of on this health kick. No carbs right now. I stood there for a second, feeling ridiculous, like I'd shown up to a party that had ended without telling me. Oh, well, you can freeze it, I said softly. She nodded, sure. Then the door closed. A week later, I got a text from her. Thanks for the food. Next time, just let me know first. Not a thank you for thinking of us or that Lena said it was delicious, just an instruction for how to be more convenient. That's what I had become, a scheduling conflict, an obligation, a presence they tolerated instead of welcomed. The worst part? I kept trying. I sent money when Lena mentioned needing shoes for prom. I mailed her handwritten notes reminding her I loved her. I left voicemails singing her favorite lullabies from when she was little. Nothing came back. I was giving and giving and giving into a void. And it wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't say. The thank yous that never came, the invitations that never arrived, the way I started finding out about Lena's milestones through social media instead of from her. Once, she was in the local paper for winning a science award. I had no idea until someone at church showed me. That day, I sat in the church parking lot in my car, staring at her photo on the page, and I remember thinking, I used to know everything about her, and now I know nothing. I wasn't just being left behind. I was being forgotten. The day of Lena's graduation party felt like a celebration I'd been waiting my whole life for. Even with all the signs, the fading phone calls, the awkward silences, the short replies, I still showed up with my heart wide open. Hope is a hard habit to break, especially when it's wrapped in memories of baby giggles and bedtime songs. I arrived early, carrying the cake I had stayed up until midnight baking, 3 layers of lemon sponge, Lena's favorite. I even hand-piped tiny lilac flowers along the top, the same shade as her graduation stole. My back ached from the hours standing in the kitchen, but I was proud. It wasn't just dessert. It was a gesture, a memory, a final gift before she stepped into the next chapter of her life. The backyard was beautifully decorated. Twinkle lights, purple and silver streamers, a custom banner that read, "Congratulations, Lena." There were speakers playing pop music I didn't recognize and folding tables packed with catered food. Teenagers in ripped jeans and crop tops mingled beside adults in business casual. It felt more like a Pinterest party than a family gathering. I waved to Rebecca, who was busy refilling the drinks table. She offered a quick smile and mouthed, "Thank you," before darting off to speak with someone I didn't recognize. I found a small patch of shade, set the cake down gently on the dessert table, and adjusted the foil so the frosting wouldn't smear. I watched Lena from across the yard, surrounded by a crowd of friends. She looked radiant, confident, the kind of girl who was used to being the center of every room. She hadn't seen me yet, so I walked closer, hoping to surprise her, maybe hug her, maybe, if the moment was right, give her the small envelope I had written her a note in, a few words from me to her, something personal, something loving. I had tucked it into my purse like a secret. As I got closer, I heard laughter, high-pitched, giddy, the kind that makes you feel either 10 years younger or 10 years older, depending on who's laughing. Lena was mid-story, waving her hands around animatedly. I stood just behind the group, waiting for her to see me. That's when she said it, clear as day. "Oh my God, she's too old to be here. That's my grandma." Her voice wasn't angry. It was amused, like I was a joke, like my presence was something to laugh about. Her friends burst into giggles. One girl gasped and whispered something, and another one laughed so hard she snorted. Lena didn't correct them. She didn't say it was just a joke or that I was the one who raised her when her mom was still finishing college. She just smiled like it was true, like it was funny, like I was nothing. My body went still. It felt like someone had taken a needle and pricked my heart, not deeply enough to kill, but just enough to let something essential slowly leak out. And in that moment, something inside me curled inward. I smiled, not out of joy, but out of training. It's what women do when the room laughs and we're the target. We smile when the people we've loved reduce us to a punchline. We pretend it doesn't hurt. I stepped back slowly, no one noticed. I walked over to the dessert table, removed the foil from the cake, placed the serving knife beside it, and made sure it looked just right. I stood there for a moment, wondering if she'd come over, wondering if Rebecca would pull her aside and whisper, "That wasn't okay." But no one came. I picked up my purse, my envelope still sealed inside, and quietly made my way to the side gate. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. But as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I realized something chilling. They weren't just laughing at me. They were laughing without me, and that hurt more. I drove home in silence. The only sound was the click of the blinker and the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. Somewhere between that backyard and my front porch, a line was crossed that couldn't be uncrossed, not by cake, not by cards, not even by love. I didn't storm out of that party. There was no scene, no shattered plate or tearful speech. No one even noticed I was leaving, and maybe that's what broke me most. I walked to my car with steady hands, clutching my purse like it was the only part of me that still held shape, the same purse Lena had once decorated with stick-on rhinestones when she was 6. Somewhere in the front pocket, nestled inside a small envelope, was the note I had written her that morning. It said, "Lena, I am so proud of you. I've loved you every single day of your life, and I always will. Love, Grandma." But she didn't read it because I never gave it to her. I sat in the car for a long time before turning the key, maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. I just sat there, staring out at the house, watching silhouettes of teenagers through the windows, hearing bursts of laughter, music humming through the summer air. Somewhere in that house, a cake was being sliced, the one I made by hand. A piece of me was still in there, but no one missed it. I didn't feel anger, not yet. What I felt was something quieter, heavier, like grief, not for a person, but for a place I thought I held in someone's life. A place I had nurtured, protected, poured into like a garden I believed would bloom forever. But you don't realize you've been pushed out until you're standing outside the walls. I drove home slowly. Every red light felt like a moment to rethink, to question whether I was overreacting, being sensitive, too emotional. Those were the words women like me get hit with when we name our pain, so I kept my lips sealed, even in the silence of my own car. By the time I walked into my quiet house, the lights blinking softly from timers I'd set years ago, the numbness had wrapped itself around me like a shawl. I kicked off my shoes, changed into my nightgown, and sat down at the edge of my bed. I thought about calling Rebecca just to talk, just to say, "That really hurt." But I didn't want to hear her say, "Oh, Mom, she didn't mean it," or worse, "Don't take everything so seriously." Because I'd taken everything seriously my whole life. I sat there for a long time, hands in my lap, feet bare against the hardwood. And then, like a switch flipped in my brain, I remembered something. The fund, the college savings account I had opened when Lena was still learning to walk. Every holiday, every tax refund, every side tutoring gig, I had saved for her quietly, faithfully, without ever asking for anything in return. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, pulled out the small accordion folder where I kept my financial files, and slipped out the login sheet I hadn't touched in nearly 6 months. My handwriting was still neat and careful. I'd labeled it Lena's College Future. I opened my laptop and logged in. $72,481.23. That number looked at me like a stranger. I hovered the cursor over the Withdraw Funds tab, but I didn't click it, not yet. Instead, I stared at the screen and whispered out loud, "Am I still doing this for her, or just holding on to what we used to be?" I closed the laptop and sat back in the chair, and that's when it hit me. The moment of clarity, painful but clean. I didn't belong to them anymore, not the way I thought I did, not in the way that made love feel safe. And they weren't going to force me out. I had walked away that night. I didn't cry, I didn't plan revenge, I didn't draft long messages or rehearse speeches. I simply stood up from the emotional table where I had fed everyone but myself and walked away, not with rage, not with drama, but with a quiet, broken kind of peace. I wasn't ready for what came next, but I was finally done waiting to be seen. Rock bottom isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a quiet Tuesday morning, a bowl of oatmeal going cold on the kitchen counter, a phone that doesn't ring, a mailbox full of ads but no letters, a calendar where every day is blank. 2 weeks passed since the party, I hadn't spoken to Rebecca. Lena never reached out. No thank you for the cake, no apology for the comment, nothing, just silence. I told myself I needed the space, that I was choosing peace. But peace, I discovered, can be indistinguishable from loneliness when you haven't heard a familiar voice in days. The walls of my house started to echo differently. I used to fill them with humming TV reruns, phone calls, the sound of stirring sauces or slicing vegetables. Now, they felt hollow. I was existing inside a shell of a life I once loved. One night, I made dinner for one, just a simple soup. I set the table like I always did, poured water into both glasses like muscle memory. Then I sat down and realized I had set a place for Lena just out of habit. I stared at her empty chair for almost an hour. The spoon in my hand never moved. The next day, I dropped by the community center, where I used to volunteer every other Friday. I hadn't been in a few months. Life got busy, knees started aching more, and lately, I'd felt unwelcome even there. I walked into the rec room and saw a group of newer volunteers laughing around the coffee cart. I smiled and waved, but no one recognized me. The director glanced up from her clipboard and said, "Oh, hi. Were you here for yoga? That's down the hall." I said nothing, just smiled that same tired smile I'd worn at Lena's party. I turned around and walked out. On the drive home, the radio played a song Lena and I used to sing in the car. I turned it off. I didn't want the memories. They hurt more than silence. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared out the window. I thought of calling my sister Leona, but we hadn't been close since her husband passed, and I didn't have the energy to explain why I suddenly felt like a ghost in my own family. That night, I looked through an old photo album, the thick leather one with Lena's name embossed in gold on the cover. Every page told a story of a life I gave her. Her first tooth, her school concerts, her 11th birthday when she wanted a mermaid theme, and I hand-sewed little tales for all her dolls. In every photo, I was there right beside her. I closed the book and held it tight to my chest. Then I cried. Not a loud, dramatic cry, just a slow, aching leak from the corners of my eyes as I rocked slightly in the dark. My breath stayed shallow. My lips never opened. It wasn't a cry for comfort. It was a cry that had no witness, no audience, and no purpose but release. I felt ashamed for hoping they would notice I'd gone quiet, that they'd text, call, show up, say, "We miss you, we're sorry." But no one did. That was rock bottom. Not the betrayal, not the comment, not the cake left untouched. It was the realization that no one was coming. For someone who had spent her entire life being there, that realization broke something fundamental. For once, I had no one to pour into, and nothing left to pour from. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind that soaks the garden and makes everything smell like memory. I was reorganizing the small cabinet in the corner of my bedroom, the one I hadn't touched in years. It was filled with old utility bills, clipped coupons I never used, greeting cards from holidays long past. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just wanted to feel useful. When your phone's silent and your house is still, organizing becomes a kind of therapy. Each paper a reminder that you once had purpose. That's when I found it, a thick, faded envelope labeled in my handwriting, Lena College Fund Records. I sat down on the edge of my bed and slowly opened it. Inside were prints from the bank, every deposit I'd made into her 529 college accounts since she was a toddler. Meticulous logs, handwritten notes, a spreadsheet I'd made years ago back when I was still teaching part-time and couldn't afford much, but made it work anyway. There were years when I contributed only $50, others when I managed to tuck away $1,000, Christmas bonuses, tax refunds, birthday checks from relatives that I rerouted straight into that account. All there, all documented. 17 years of sacrifice. 17 years of believing that if I gave enough, loved hard enough, helped quietly enough, I would always be appreciated, respected, remembered. Tears welled in my eyes, but I kept flipping through the pages. At the very back of the envelope was something else, a folded acceptance letter addressed to me. It was from the Midwest Writers Fellowship Program, dated 1989. I had forgotten about it a lifetime ago, before Rebecca was born. I had applied on a whim. I was in my late 20s, fresh off a creative writing course at the local community college. One of the professors encouraged me to submit a short story. I did, and they accepted me. The fellowship covered room and board for 6 months, a cabin in the mountains, time to write, time to breathe. I never went. Rebecca came early, then there were hospital bills, then Darren left, then there was work, always work. I stared at the yellowing paper, the official letterhead now wrinkled and soft around the edges. I had been chosen once, seen, wanted, not for what I could do for someone else, but for what I could do for me. I laid the letter on the bed beside the college fund records and stared at them both side by side. $72,000. That's what I had given up piece by piece to make sure Lena could chase her dreams, even as I buried my own. And what had she given in return? A smirk, a laugh, a joke at my expense. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, still holding the papers. I brewed a cup of tea, sat at the table, and opened my laptop. I logged into the fund. The balance blinked at me again, just as it had the night of the party. $72,481.23. Not a single contribution had come from Rebecca, not a cent from Lena. Every dollar had come from me, through sacrifice, through love, through the quiet belief that I would always have a place in their world. I stared at that number and thought, what if I use this not to help someone else fly, but to finally lift myself? The thought terrified me, but it also thrilled me. I clicked through the settings, explored the options, saw what was allowed: rollovers, withdrawals, reassignments. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt awake. I didn't take the money out that day, not yet, but the seed was planted. That letter, that forgotten dream, the weight of those fund records, they lit something inside me, something that had been buried beneath casseroles, carpool duty, birthday checks, and polite smiles. I wasn't just a grandmother. I wasn't just support. I was a person, a woman, a writer, a dreamer, and I was not done. Something shifted after I found that letter. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic lightning bolt, no defiant makeover montage, just a quiet moment where I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, she's still in there. Not grandma, not mom, not the one who bakes or babysits or pays. Me, Marilyn, the girl who once scribbled poems in the margins of science books, the young woman who daydreamed about telling stories that made people feel seen, the version of me I'd let fade over time beneath diapers, jobs, bills, and everyone else's needs. The first time in years, I lit a candle just for the scent, not because someone was coming over. I put on a cardigan I hadn't worn in a decade, plum with little velvet buttons. It still fit. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Hi," as if greeting an old friend I hadn't seen in ages. Then I opened my laptop, created a new document, and started to write. At first, it was clumsy. My fingers hesitated. The words felt thick, awkward, foreign. But I kept going, paragraph by paragraph. I didn't try to be perfect. I just tried to be honest. I wrote about motherhood, grief, aging, joy, betrayal. I wrote about standing in the middle of a party and realizing no one saw me anymore. I wrote about choosing myself after being overlooked for decades, and I cried as I typed, not from sadness, but from a kind of release I didn't know I needed. The next morning, I signed up for a free online writing course. They offered one for mature students. I checked the box proudly. Every evening after that, I wrote for 30 minutes, no distractions, no checking in with Rebecca or texting to ask if Lena needed anything, just me, a cup of tea, and a blinking cursor on a white page. It felt like building a bridge, not back to who I was, but forward to who I might still become. I pulled out my old journal, the one I kept when Rebecca was a baby. Inside were letters I'd written to her, stories of our days, notes about her first laugh, first steps, her favorite bedtime. In the back, I found a page I had written to myself sometime around 1985. It said, "Don't forget you were someone before this, and you still are." I stared at those words for a long time, and then I smiled. The next day, I did something even bolder. I emailed the Midwest Writers Fellowship, the same one from that old acceptance letter. I didn't know if the program still existed, but I figured, what's the harm in asking? They replied the next morning. The program was still active. They had a new senior track. All I had to do was submit a short story, so I did. I chose the one about Lena, about the party, about the moment I realized I didn't need to earn love by shrinking. I changed names, of course, but I left the emotions raw, unfiltered. Submitting it felt like breathing again after holding my breath for years. Then, quietly, with no announcement, no fanfare, I logged back into the college fund account. I didn't withdraw the money yet, but I renamed the account. It used to be labeled Lena's College Savings. Now it said Marilyn's Second Chance. I stared at those 3 words for a long time, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light, like maybe, just maybe, I still had time, not to be who I was before, but to become someone I'd like to know again. After I renamed the college fund to Marilyn's Second Chance, something in me locked into place. A quiet resolve, not revenge, not bitterness, just clarity. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning, not Rebecca, not Lena, not my sister Leona. I didn't even hint at it in my journal. Some things feel too sacred to say out loud while they're still becoming real. Instead, I moved in silence. First, I called the bank and asked about penalties, rollovers, and tax implications. I spoke to a kind woman named Julie, who said, "You're well within your rights, ma'am. You're the account holder. You can reallocate however you see fit." I thanked her, hung up, then I opened a new personal savings account under my name. I labeled it Freedom. I moved the college fund into it in slow, careful portions. No big transactions, nothing flashy, just quiet motion. Every day, a little more of my life shifted back into my hands. Next, I made a spreadsheet. I hadn't made one in years. I listed writing retreats, classes, train trips I'd always dreamed of taking. Nothing extravagant, just things that reminded me I was still a person who had dreams, a woman with a future. I even pulled out my old passport and renewed it, just in case. I started waking up earlier, not for chores or errands, but for me. I wrote first thing in the morning with a cup of strong coffee and the sound of birds outside my window. There was something sacred about that silence, a kind of peace I hadn't known since before motherhood swallowed me whole. I bought a pair of wireless earbuds, the kind Lena once teased me for not knowing how to use, and started listening to podcasts about storytelling, memoir, creativity, and later life. I walked around my neighborhood with a slight bounce in my step, soaking up words like water after a drought. And I didn't tell a soul because this wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about making anyone regret how they treated me. This was about reclaiming myself without permission, without applause. There's something beautiful about being underestimated. People stop watching, they stop listening, they assume you've given up. That's when you can do your best work. Rebecca texted me once to ask if I could pick up Lena from her part-time job. I replied politely, "Sorry, I have plans today." No explanation, no over-apology, just a boundary. She never responded. I didn't chase her for one. I kept writing. I submitted 3 essays to local contests. One got published online. I used a pen name, but when I saw my words on that screen, I cried anyway. Not because of recognition, but because I was doing it quietly, powerfully, unstoppably. I visited the local library and asked the clerk if they had any open slots for guest readings. She said they had one left for seniors' night next month. I signed up. I didn't know if anyone would come, but I was going to show up, not for them, for me. At night, I'd sit in bed and read the printout of the story I submitted to the writing fellowship. I edited a few lines, marked them with a red pen, not because they were bad, but because I was becoming better, the kind of better that doesn't need to be seen, just felt. Rebecca never asked about the fund again. I think she assumed it was still sitting there, waiting for Lena's tuition bill. They were too busy or too confident to check, and I didn't offer. I let them believe what they wanted to believe because in their world I was still the woman who gave without asking, who showed up without question. But they didn't see the woman who had begun to rebuild herself from scratch, brick by brick, word by word, dollar by dollar. The woman who wasn't waiting to be invited back into their lives. The woman who had finally stepped into her own. Would you like to continue with section 11? The power begins to shift. Next, it started with a text message, just 2 words from Rebecca. "Hey, urgent." I saw it pop up while I was outlining a new essay idea, something about generational silence and inherited duty. I let it sit for a while, 5 minutes. That alone was a shift. Old me would have dropped everything to respond. New me finished her paragraph first. When I finally opened the message thread, I saw the next one. Need the login for Lena's college account. Payments due. That was it. No hi, no how are you, not even a question mark. I stared at the screen, then typed slowly. The fund has been closed. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. What? Since when? What are you talking about? I didn't reply right away. I stood up, poured myself a glass of lemon water, and walked out onto the porch. The hydrangeas I'd planted last spring were blooming, soft blues, gentle whites. They swayed in the wind like they had secrets of their own. When I came back in, I typed, I moved the funds. It was my account, my choice. The reply came almost instantly. You told me that was for Lena. And there it was. That small sharp sting coated in entitlement and unspoken expectation. Not, thank you for all the years you saved. Not, we should have talked about this. Just accusation, just ownership. I let the phone sit on the table and walked away. I didn't owe her an explanation. Not after 17 years of deposits that were met with diminishing gratitude. Not after being laughed at in a backyard filled with borrowed smiles and cheap music. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my email. A new message had come in from the fellowship program. My story had been accepted. Not only that, I had been offered a full scholarship for their Senior Voices residency, 2 weeks, a cabin in the mountains, all expenses covered. Time to write, time to be. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, but it wasn't a sad laugh. It was a full one, deep, alive. That night, I posted a short excerpt of my story anonymously on a writing forum. I watched as strangers commented. This gave me chills, and I felt every word. One woman messaged me privately and said, "You made me feel seen. Thank you." And that did something no apology ever could. Later that week, Rebecca called. I didn't answer. She tried again the next day, then texted, "Can we talk about this? You're being really unfair." I smiled at that word, unfair. That's how they saw it. Me reclaiming my own money, my own time, my own life was unfair. But what had been fair about the way I'd been forgotten? I didn't reply, and that silence, that was the power shift. Lena posted something cryptic on her social media a few days later. A picture of her college acceptance letter with a caption, "Guessed dreams don't matter when you're inconvenient." There were sympathy comments, friends saying, "What happened?" And some people are just selfish. I read them without flinching because I knew the truth. I hadn't done this to punish her. I'd done it to free me. And whether they ever saw that or not, I wasn't responsible for their version of the story anymore. I was writing my own. The silence between us grew, but this time it didn't feel like loss. It felt like air, room to breathe, space to grow. Because while they scrambled to figure out what had changed, what shifted beneath them, who pulled the rug, they never once thought to ask how it had felt to be dismissed, ignored, humiliated, and still show up anyway. They never thought it might be me, the woman they once called too old to be here, who had taken control. They didn't see the power moving, but it was mine. It was a Wednesday when they finally came to my door, not a holiday, not a birthday, just an overcast midweek afternoon where I had planned to clean out the hallway closet and make lentil soup. I saw the car pull into the driveway and felt it in my stomach before I even stood up. That particular tense flutter you only get when someone you love has hurt you, but you're still unsure whether they've come to apologize or demand something else. It was Rebecca driving. Lena sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, sunglasses on as if shielding herself from the reality of being there. She didn't even glance toward the house. I didn't rush to greet them. I didn't smooth my hair or rehearse any words. I simply opened the door when they knocked and said calmly, "Hi." Rebecca's smile was tight, brittle. Lena didn't look at me at all. "We need to talk," Rebecca said. I stepped aside and gestured to the living room. I watched them enter a space I had once designed for them. Framed photos on the walls, a candle burning, the cinnamon scent Lena loved as a child. Now it all felt like props from a play no one believed in anymore. They sat, I didn't. Rebecca cleared her throat. "You moved the college money." "I did," I said. "You didn't tell us." "I didn't need to." Silence. Lena finally looked up, her face unreadable. That money was for me. I nodded. It was until it wasn't. Rebecca leaned forward, her voice sharpening. Mom, this isn't like you. You've always said education was the best gift. You saved for years. You told Lena this was her foundation. I did. I agreed. And then one day I realized something. I had built a foundation for someone who didn't even care if I was standing on it. Lena rolled her eyes. So, this is about what I said at the party? Seriously? I looked her straight in the face. No, Lena, this isn't about what you said. It's about what you didn't say for months, for years. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I continued. It's about how I became a ghost in my own family, how you stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like a wallet. A servant, an embarrassment. I gave, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else. Rebecca's voice softened. You should have said something. I did. In every text, every birthday card, every home-cooked meal, every silent moment where I hoped you'd notice I was hurting. She looked down. Lena scoffed quietly. So now what? You just take it all back and pretend like I didn't deserve it? No, I said gently. You didn't deserve it, not the way you treated me. Love isn't a reward for cruelty. Respect isn't optional. She blinked at me, stunned. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a printed copy of my short story, the one that had been accepted into the fellowship. I handed it to them without ceremony. This got published. I leave for the residency next month. Rebecca looked at the first page, then back at me. You wrote this. I did. Lena looked confused. Wait, you're like a writer now. I gave a small smile. No, Lena, I've always been a writer. You just stopped seeing me as anything but too old. They sat there in silence, unsure how to respond. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't rush in to comfort them. I didn't explain. I didn't soften the truth because it wasn't theirs to soften. It was mine to stand in. I folded my hands. You're both welcome in my life, but from now on, it will be on my terms, not out of obligation, not out of habit, and not out of guilt. Rebecca nodded slowly. Okay, I hear you. Lena looked away, jaw tight. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be, and I'd made peace with that. They left soon after. No hugs, no grand resolution, just a door quietly closing behind them and me still standing, not smaller, not broken, but whole. A few weeks after the confrontation, I received the official email. Congratulations, Marilyn. You've been selected as the Senior Voices residency winner. I stared at the screen, rereading those words over and over. They felt surreal, like someone had handed me a life I forgot I was allowed to live. The fellowship came with a $25,000 stipend, a 2-week writing retreat in the mountains, and an opportunity to have my work professionally edited and published in a national collection. I sat there frozen, one hand covering my mouth, tears building in my eyes. But these were not the same tears I cried alone in the kitchen weeks before. These were not about grief or loss or humiliation. These were the kind that whispered, "You did this for you." It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the validation, the knowing that something I created, something born not from obligation but from honesty, was worthy, seen, chosen. That afternoon, I printed the acceptance letter and pinned it to the fridge, right where Lena's drawings used to hang. It felt poetic. 2 days later, Rebecca called. She had seen the announcement. A local news outlet ran a small feature about the fellowship titled, At 64, Retired Teacher's Story on Generational Silence Earns National Honor. They had even used a headshot I submitted. It was the first photo I'd taken of myself in years where I wasn't trying to hide behind a grandchild or a cake or a Thanksgiving centerpiece. Just me standing in the light. Rebecca's voice on the phone was tight. Why didn't you tell us? I paused, then said calmly, I didn't think you'd be interested. She hesitated. That story, was it about us? I didn't answer directly. It was about a woman who gave everything and finally remembered to give something back to herself. She was quiet for a while. People are asking questions. Lena's friends saw it. Some of them are sharing it on their stories. I raised an eyebrow. And she's embarrassed? I took a breath. You know what's funny? I've been embarrassed for years, sitting at dinner tables where no one asked me how I was, standing in parties where I was the punchline. But I stayed silent. Now the silence is over. Rebecca tried to pivot. This is all happening so fast. No, I said softly, it's not. It's been happening for decades. You just didn't see it or didn't want to. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. It was from Lena, handwritten. Short, Grandma, I didn't know how much I hurt you. I didn't think I was stupid and selfish, and I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say that I read your story. I cried. I miss you. I really do. There was no ask, no request for the money back, no plea for college help, just regret. And somehow, that was more powerful than any check I ever wrote. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the front cover of the notebook where I'd written my first story draft, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that truth has weight, and when you carry it long enough, it eventually shifts everything around you. The following week, my editor reached out. They wanted to feature my piece in a special print edition with my real name, with a photo and a byline. I stood in front of my mirror again that night in the same plum cardigan I'd rediscovered weeks earlier and looked at myself differently. I wasn't just a grandmother. I wasn't just someone's backup plan or bank account. I was a writer. I was a woman who had been erased and redrawn her own outline, and the world, the one that had once passed me by, was finally paying attention. The letter from Lena stayed tucked inside my writing notebook for a week before I touched it again. I didn't call. I didn't text. Instead, I let it breathe the way you let a wound breathe when it's been hidden under a bandage too long. It needed air, honesty, time. I reread her words every few days, trying to hear not just what she said, but how she said it. There was no manipulation, no "I need money" or "what about the college fund?" Just a simple truth. I miss you. It didn't erase what had happened, but it softened something inside me. Then one evening, I heard a soft knock at my door. Not the urgent kind, not the guilty, angry kind, just hopeful. I opened it, and there she was, no sunglasses, no crossed arms, just Lena in a hoodie and jeans with her hands stuffed in her pockets, like a little girl again.
"Hi," she said.
"Hi," I replied. Stood there for a beat too long. 2 generations of silence and love and hurt, and years balancing in the space between us. I was in the neighborhood, she mumbled. Well, I wasn't. I just wanted to see you. I stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. She walked into the living room like it was a museum, careful, unsure where to stand, what to touch. She looked at the photo frames on the mantel, then at the printout of my story on the bookshelf. I read it twice, she said, eyes still scanning the room, once fast, once slow. It made me feel awful, but also like I understood you in a way I never really did. I sat down and gestured for her to do the same. She hesitated and sank into the old armchair across from me, the one where she used to curl up with picture books when she was 5. I didn't realize how much you did for me, she whispered. Like I knew you were always there, but I didn't see you. I stayed quiet. I let her speak. I was cruel at the party, she admitted, and for a long time before that. I think I was trying to grow up so fast. I thought I had to push away everything that made me feel small. And I guess love makes you feel small sometimes, because it humbles you. That caught me off guard, not the apology but the insight. She wasn't a child anymore, not fully. She had started the long, messy journey of becoming a person who could own her pain and how she'd caused it in others. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, she said. I just wanted to tell you that I get it now. You weren't just helping me. You were giving me your life, and I acted like it was owed to me. I nodded slowly. It wasn't the cake, Lena, or even the college fund. It was that I disappeared and no one noticed. Tears welled up in her eyes. I noticed after it was too late. I got up, walked to my notebook, and pulled out her letter. I handed it to her. I kept it, I said, because it was the first thing in a long time that felt real. She took it in her hands like it weighed something. Maybe because it did. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just letting the honesty hang there between us. Then she asked, could we start small? Maybe I come over on Sundays? No talk about college or money or anything, just cocoa and stories. That made me smile. Stories I can do, I said. She smiled too. I'd like to know who you were before me. I'd like that too, I said. And that was it. No hugs, no grand reunion, just a soft reopening of a door that had slammed shut months ago. She left a little while later. The air in the house felt different after she was gone, lighter, not because everything had been fixed, but because I hadn't needed her to fix it for me. I had already done that part. Now, if she wanted to be part of my life, she was welcome, but I would never again shrink myself to fit in someone else's story. I live alone now, but not lonely. That's something people get wrong about women like me, women who spent decades pouring into others. They think our lives are defined by who we gave to, who we served, who we raised. And when those people leave or pull away, they assume we crumble. But the truth is, I didn't vanish when they stopped seeing me. I started to appear. It began with a cabin in the mountains. The writer's residency was everything I didn't know I needed. A fire crackling in the evenings, the scent of pine, the slow, generous rhythm of days filled with nothing but space to create. I was surrounded by strangers who weren't strangers at all. Other women, many older than me, who had also set their lives aside for husbands, children, or work and were now trying to find their way back to themselves. We shared stories over coffee. We read drafts by candlelight. We laughed about how no one ever told us starting over could feel like falling in love with yourself. One night, I stood out on the deck of the cabin, wrapped in a soft blanket, looking up at a sky filled with more stars than I'd seen in years. I thought of Lena, of Rebecca, of the life I had lived so long for them that I forgot I had one of my own. And I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt free. When I came home, I printed my story and framed it. I placed it on the wall near my writing desk, not to boast, but to remind myself what's possible when you stop waiting for someone to choose you. I still talk to Lena now, sometimes on Sundays like she asked. She brings tea, and we read books or go through old photo albums. She listens in a way she never did before, and sometimes she doesn't talk much at all, but she shows up. And at this stage in life, showing up is the only apology I need. Rebecca checks in from time to time. She hasn't asked about the money again. I think she finally understood that this wasn't about finances. It was about identity, about respect, about being more than what others wanted from me. I haven't rebuilt every relationship in my life, and I don't plan to, because I've finally realized that healing doesn't mean bringing everyone back. Sometimes it means bringing yourself home. These days, I spend my mornings writing by the window with a cup of spiced coffee. I teach a local memoir class once a week at the library, where I listen to other women tell their truths for the first time. I've seen tears fall onto notebook paper as if the pages themselves were baptizing them into a new beginning. Sometimes people ask, "Do you wish you had done all this sooner?" And I used to say yes, but now I know I did it when I was ready, when I could do it for me, not for validation, not for permission, not even for love, just for the simple, beautiful truth that my story was mine to live and mine to tell. So I don't regret the years I gave. I don't even regret the silence, because without all of it, I wouldn't be here now, on my porch on a breezy spring morning, watching the trees sway while I typed the final words of my second short story collection. Not grandma's story, not mom's story, mine. And that is.